Throughout Kenner's original run of Star Wars action figures, we received more versions of Luke Skywalker than any other character, which makes sense with him being the story's central hero. To put things into perspective, of the trilogy's core hero grouping, we were offered only one version of Chewie, 2 C-3POs, 3 R2-D2s, 5 Leias and 5 Hans. Yet there were a total of 7 different Lukes, making him the most prolific character in the toy range. With Kenner making more attempts than any other at translating this movie character into sculpted 3 3/4 inch action figure form, you'd think they would have perfected him by the time the line ended in 1985. But the figure versions of Luke Skywalker are peppered with inaccuracies, and I'm starting to wonder if Kenner ever got him right.
Come with me, toy fans.
Hey Star Wars fans, my name is Tony and welcome back to the Analog Toys YouTube channel. Before we head deep down into this galactic wormhole, it's important to note that I'm not judging these figures by today's action figure manufacturing standards. I won't be commenting on the figure's basic 5 POA articulation or the quality of the face sculpting or paintwork, because the simplistic nature of these design elements are aligned with the rest of the figures in the range, and this was the standard established by Kenner Toys from 1978 to 1985. What I will be talking about are the clearly obvious screw-ups that plagued all of these figures, that started with the original Luke Skywalker way back in 1978. Often referred to as Farmboy Luke by today's collectors, the original action figure version of this character is dressed as he first appeared on Tatooine, but for some very bizarre reason, Kenner gave him a yellow lightsaber, and not the blue saber that appeared in the film. Luke only wields a lightsaber in Star Wars in 2 scenes. The first is when Ben Kenobi gives Luke his father's lightsaber and delivers some lines of exposition that highlight the significance of the Jedi's signature weapon.
The weapon of a Jedi Knight, not as clumsy or random as a blaster.
The second is when Ben Kenobi first starts training Luke in the ways of the Force, when they are aboard the Millennium Falcon, heading for Alderaan.
Stretch out with your feelings.
Yet in all the combat scenes aboard the Death Star, Luke never uses a lightsaber, and instead wields an Imperial blaster. But because Kenner permanently moulded a lightsaber hilt into his hand, he can't even hold one. You could kind of place a blaster in his claw-shaped left hand, but it sits at a weird angle. This just looks weird. Luke was also the only character in the first Star Wars film to get 2 different action figures, with the second one being Luke Skywalker X-Wing pilot. Thanks to a very simplistic design, this figure became a generic rebel pilot, with many of us using him as a stand-in for the other members of Red Squadron, and Kenner must have identified this play pattern in children at the time, because otherwise they have no excuse for not offering us any of the other rebel pilots seen in the first movie. Another benefit of this figure's very basic appearance is that the lack of details means there aren't really any mistakes that stand out on this figure. But Kenner did pack him in with a rebel blaster, which Luke never carried in the first film. X-Wing pilot Luke Skywalker didn't start carrying a rebel blaster until the sequel, and by that time he also carried a holster and had his lightsaber hanging from his belt. So this figure doesn't make for a decent Empire Strikes Back version either.
I know what you mean.
The first Empire version of Luke was released in 1980, and that was Luke Skywalker in Bespin fatigues. I'll ignore the fact that Kenner should have called this figure something other than Bespin fatigues, since the first time Luke wears this uniform is actually on Dagobah, but this has always been my favourite action figure in the entire line, because it represents the way our hero looked in the most pivotal scenes of the original trilogy. Bespin Luke was one of the first figures in the line to be issued with 2 weapon accessories, with the only other dual wielder at that time being IG-88. Thankfully by 1980, Kenner had done away with the concept of moulding the lightsaber hilt into Luke's hand, and having the blade extend through the slot in his arm, and they instead produced a brand new lightsaber accessory. Yet once again they manufactured the weapon in yellow plastic.
That's impossible!
And the reasons for this truly boggle the mind. If you want to unravel this mystery and venture down the yellow lightsaber rabbit hole, then I highly recommend checking out the retroblasting video feature, Don't Eat the Yellow Lightsaber.
Why does Kenner always get Luke's lightsaber color wrong? Why? Why? Why?
I'll leave a link in the description below.
Do or do not. There is no try.
The next action figure representation of the main hero was Hoth Luke, but we wouldn't receive him until a full 2 years after the release of The Empire Strikes Back. Hoth Luke Skywalker was issued in 1982, finally completing the trio of Hoth heroes, after this version of Han was released in 1980, with Hoth Leia coming out in 1981. Prior to the release of this figure, many of us used the Hoth Rebel Soldier as our stand-in for Hoth Luke during playtime, since this figure was released alongside Bespin Luke and Hoth Han Solo back in 1980. After waiting 2 years before eventually getting our hands on Luke Skywalker in his Hoth battle gear, Kenner then made the boneheaded decision of issuing the figure with a blaster rifle that he never uses in the movie. But you know what he does use? A lightsaber. And not only does Luke use the lightsaber to escape the Wampa's cave, but Han Solo also employs the Jedi blade to cut open the belly of the Tauntaun. And since Kenner revised the toy version of this creature and introduced the open belly variant in 1982, it made it doubly frustrating that the action figure was never issued with a lightsaber accessory. Further compounding my annoyance is that Hoth Luke's right hand is perfectly sculpted to hold a lightsaber, yet his grip is way too small to grasp the handle of the blaster he was actually given. Instead, all he can really do is hold it by the sling. Since this blaster rifle was also issued to the Rebel Commander released in 1981, you could suggest that Kenner simply wanted to save a few pennies by reusing tooling, but that argument doesn't hold any water, since the new lightsaber accessory that came with Bespin Luke was produced 2 years earlier. Finally, adding insult to injury, Hoth Luke is sculpted with a bizarre sideways lean, looking less like a rebel hero and more like a cantina drunk.
Play it nice and cool, son. Nice and cool, you know what I mean?
To coincide with the release of Return of the Jedi in 1983, Kenner came out of the gate with one of the best versions of Luke they ever produced. Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker has a fantastic sculpt, and he came with a soft goods robe, the Jabba's Palace blaster, and a lightsaber that was no longer coloured yellow. Yet it still took Kenner 2 attempts to get the colour of this lightsaber correct. The earliest releases of this action figure were packed in with a blue lightsaber accessory, even though the blade on Luke's saber in Return of the Jedi was green. This error was likely caused by Lucasfilm, who had originally intended for Luke to carry a blue lightsaber, as he had done in the previous 2 films. Yet when they were filming the scenes around the Sarlacc pit, this colour of lightsaber didn't show up very well against the blue desert sky, so Lucasfilm later decided to change the colour of the blade to green. There is also an infamous deleted scene from the original trilogy's final instalment, where Luke completes the construction of his new lightsaber in a small cave on Tatooine.
I see you have constructed a new lightsaber.
If it weren't for this mishap, Kenner's Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker would have been the most accurate action figure version of this character in the entire line. And despite this slip-up, I am still eternally grateful that we were offered another blue lightsaber, outside of the one that came with Obi-Wan Kenobi back in 1978. While this accessory just looks plain weird when held by Bespin Luke, probably because my brain has had 44 years to get used to seeing him hold a yellow one, the blue lightsaber does look terrific when given to Hoth Luke, and allows our hero to finally defend himself against the Wampa.
New Tauntaun and Hoth Wampa and other action figures, each sold separately from Kenner Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back collection.
Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker is the only version of this character to be released on a Return of the Jedi card back. Yet Kenner did go on to produce 2 more versions of Luke as part of their Power of the Force line in 1985. The release of Luke in Stormtrooper disguise represented the first action figure to be offered since 1979, which was based on character designs from the original Star Wars movie. Here Luke is dressed in Stormtrooper armour, and he comes with an Imperial blaster and a removable helmet. Quite distressingly though, Kenner gave this version of Luke a tiny little head.
Hey, what are you doing? Hey, stop it! Hey, you're messing up here! Come on! Whoa! Whoa! Stop it! Whoa!
The designers probably had little choice but to shrink Luke's head down so that it could fit inside the helmet, but the resulting sculpt is very unnerving. My displeasure at the aesthetics of this figure aside, there aren't really any mistakes here. There is, however, one glaring omission. In all the scenes on the Death Star where Luke is dressed in Stormtrooper armour, he is wearing a black gun belt. And since removable belt accessories had been available in the toy line since 1981, I'm still racking my brains as to why Luke in Stormtrooper disguise was never given one, because when you put a belt on him, the figure looks 10 times better.
I can't see a thing in this helmet.
As the Star Wars toy line progressed from 1978 through to 1985, Kenner continually got better at making action figures. So you'd think that the final Luke Skywalker released would be the best in the line. But it's not. It's the worst of them all. More commonly referred to as Endor Luke, Kenner named this figure Luke Skywalker in Battle Poncho, and here Luke is dressed in the outfit he wore when he first landed on the Forest Moon. The soft goods poncho is a nice accessory, and Luke comes with a removable belt, similar to the one that came with Endor Leia in 1984. The difference is that Leia's blaster can actually fit inside her holster, but Kenner opted to give Luke the massive Jabba's Palace blaster that is far too large to be holstered, and it's a weapon that he never uses on Endor. But you know what he does use? And I sound like a broken record. A freaking lightsaber! The fact that Kenner had a green lightsaber in their inventory, but didn't issue it with this figure, should be considered a crime. Yet at least we can correct that mistake by giving him the Jedi Luke saber. But what we can't do is remove his bloody helmet. I'm sure some of you will already be furiously typing away in the comment section saying that the non-removable helmet never bothered you. And I might be able to let it slide as well, if Kenner had produced a Death Star dual Luke Skywalker. But they didn't. And before you suggest simply removing the cloak from Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker and using that for the Death Star duel scenes, the outfit Luke wore underneath is correct to the way he appeared at the Sarlacc pit, but not accurate to what he wore on the Death Star. Luke Skywalker in Battle Poncho is the only figure in the line that has the trilogy's main hero wearing the correct costume from the final battle of the series, and he stands there all goofy looking, with that big dumb helmet on his head. This frustration has inspired some collectors to take matters into their own hands, with my friend Michael Schaefer taking the body of Endor Luke and using the boil and pop technique to swap out the figure's head with the Jedi Knight version, and the end result looks so amazing that I'll probably do it myself one day. The lack of a decent Death Star dual Luke also brings up the matter of the other versions of Luke Skywalker that were conspicuously absent from the line. While I'm pretty sure no one is asking for a Yavin Ceremony Luke, many of us would like a Snowspeeder pilot version, and although Hasbro did eventually offer one as part of their retro collection, it came with an extortionate price tag because it was packed in with that stupid board game. However, the biggest missed opportunity will forever remain Dagobah training Luke. So thank heavens for fan makers like Stan Solo, who have finally filled this significant gap in our Kenner collections. When poor old Luke Skywalker X-Wing pilot is the most accurate version of this character ever produced by Kenner, you know they messed up big time. Luke Skywalker, Jedi Knight, hero of the rebellion. He stood up to both Darth Vader and the Emperor and refused to turn to the dark side, even when faced with mortal danger. Luke is a true hero who inspired our youthful imaginations. Yet the monument built by Kenner represents the 7 deadly sins of toy design, and not the memorial that he deserved. But hey, at least Kenner didn't screw over Luke's legacy as bad as Disney did. So thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, you can click the links over here to check out some of our other vintage Star Wars content, or subscribe to the channel by clicking down here, or consider supporting us on Patreon, where you'll get access to hours of exclusive content. I'm Tony from Analog Toys, and may the Force be with you.